Welcome to Serial Napper, the bedtime podcast for people who fall asleep to true crime. This episode gets dark, so if you're sensitive to graphic content, maybe skip the nightcap. You've been warned. Hey everyone, my name is Nikki Young, and this is Serial Napper, the true crime podcast for naps. I'm back with another true crime story to lull you to sleep, or perhaps to give you nightmares. Tonight, I'm covering a very much ongoing case. I usually like to wait until we have a few more details to cover a story because speculation, it doesn't really help anyone. But this is a missing child, and her family is very much missing her. A 9-year-old girl on a cross-country road trip should be making memories, not headlines. She should be taking blurry photos out of the window, begging for snacks, asking, "Are we there yet?" every 10 minutes. That's what October should have looked like for Melodee Buzzard. But somewhere between Arkansas and the California coast, Melodee stopped being in her mother's care and just kind of vanished. One minute, she's traveling with her mother. The next, she's gone. How does that happen? And the hardest part, every clue in this case, the surveillance footage, the witness statements, they all seem to raise a brand new question, especially when those clues start contradicting the one person who claims that she was there and she knows where Melodee is, her mother. Cases involving missing kids always hit differently. There's this ache in your chest that this should never happen feeling, because kids don't just walk off into the void. When a child disappears, something or someone is responsible. And the more investigators dig into Melodee's case, the messier everything gets. The timeline is messy. The statements are messy. And the truth? Well, it's buried under layers nobody's been able to unravel. Here's what we do know. A 9-year-old little girl from Lompoc vanished during a cross-country road trip with her mother in October. During that same trip, her mother swapped out license plates and wore wigs, both her and her daughter, possible attempts to avoid detection, according to authorities. While Melodee's relatives beg for answers, the one person who should be talking isn't saying a word. So dim the lights, put your phone down, and listen to the disappearance of 9-year-old Melodee Buzzard, a case that unravels into timelines that don't line up, statements that keep changing, and a mystery involving two strangers at a zoo. So let's jump right in. On October 7th, Ashlee Buzzard left California with her 9-year-old daughter, Melodee, in a white Chevrolet Malibu that she had rented in Lompoc. Now, there really hasn't been much said about the purpose of this trip, not a whole lot of confirmation, just a lot of rumors. And Ashlee, Melodee's mother, she hasn't exactly been forthcoming to police with helpful information. So, was this a random, spur-of-the-moment kind of trip, or was this trip completely planned from start to finish? And what exactly was in Nebraska? All of that is yet to be determined. However, we do know that while the Malibu started out with its original California license plates, that would soon change. The very next day, the day after they rented this car on October 8th, the white Malibu was spotted with a New York license plate, a plate that investigators say did not belong to Ashlee. Detectives believe that it was a false or swapped plate, possibly used to avoid detection. The mother and daughter headed east through long stretches of desert and highway. The Malibu sped through several states in rapid succession. According to the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office, the car was tracked moving through parts of California, Arizona, Utah, and Nevada around October 9th. But the farther they traveled, the more the trip started to raise uncomfortable questions. Because outside of Ashlee's account, no one could confirm where Melodee actually was in those final days. There weren't very many witness sightings. There weren't many employees who remembered seeing her. And there was very little proof that she ever made it far beyond California, except for her mother's word. Now, on October 9th, 2 days after they left for this trip, surveillance footage captured Melodee in an area near the Colorado-Utah state line on the return trip, the last confirmed sighting of her. Detectives now believe that, quote, somewhere along that route is where we know Ashlee was no longer with Melodee, according to a sheriff's office spokesperson. The very next day, October 10th, the Malibu rolled quietly back into the car rental agency and was returned. Original plates, the California plates, back on. No child inside, no questions answered. A road trip with no destination, apparently. A child barely seen. A whirlwind cross-country sprint, and a timeline that is super foggy. This is where the road trip ends and the real mystery begins. Even before this road trip, their life wasn't exactly stable. Melodee and Ashlee lived in a house on Mars Avenue in Santa Maria. Ashlee worked as a special education aide at a nearby school. Melodee's father had died in a motorcycle accident when she was just 6 months old. According to people who knew her, Ashlee wasn't exactly mentally stable and able to care for a child. As a single mom struggling with mental illness, things were difficult, and at one point, she was admitted into a mental hospital. It was at this time that Melodee lived with a paternal uncle, and Melodee's paternal grandmother came really close to adopting her. She really tried to get her into her care. The paperwork had been signed, they were just waiting for everything to be filed. But then Mom, Ashlee, was released from the mental hospital, and she swiftly moved in and took custody of Melodee. Whether that was the right move for the child is highly debatable, but it devastated her paternal grandmother, who was worried that Ashlee could not properly care for the little girl. After that, things became more isolated. Ashlee changed Melodee's last name to match hers. Family members said that they hadn't seen either of them in years. Melodee's aunt told reporters that it had been 4 years since she last saw her niece. One of the most recent photos of Melodee available is from 2023. In the age of cell phones, this is a little bit bizarre. She wasn't attending a traditional school either. She was enrolled in the Lompoc Unified School District's remote learning program. And the sheriff's office says that she was last seen by them in August of 2025. Kind of a strange detail considering Ashlee herself worked at a school and she would have understood the importance of having that kind of connection to the outside world and being around other kids at that age. So even before this road trip began, Melodee wasn't a child who was seen regularly by teachers, neighbors, or extended family. Unfortunately, this was the kind of situation where if something went wrong, you might not know until it was too late. Melodee's disappearance didn't start with a frantic 911 call from her mom. It didn't start with a neighbor noticing something was off. It didn't even start with a family member raising alarms. It started with a school administrator. On October 14th, which is a week after the road trip, staff at the Lompoc Unified School District, they noticed that Melodee hadn't been participating in the remote program that her mother had only recently enrolled her in. After days of complete silence from a 9-year-old who was supposed to be submitting schoolwork, someone finally said, "This doesn't look right. This isn't right." So they contacted the sheriff's office for a welfare check, citing a prolonged absence. Deputies went to the Buzzard home, and guess what? Melodee wasn't there, but her mother was. And when her mother, Ashlee, was asked where her daughter was, she couldn't give the investigators a reasonable explanation. That was the moment the search officially began. By October 17th, the sheriff's office publicly announced that Ashlee was, quote, uncooperative with investigators. And that word, uncooperative, it's doing a lot of heavy lifting here. Because as the investigation ramped up, Ashlee didn't offer any sort of clarity. She didn't really give any timelines, and she didn't guide searchers on where they should be focusing their efforts. She didn't help at all. The FBI joined the investigation on October 18th, which is never a great sign for where a missing child case is headed. Federal involvement means something deeper, something broader, something very not normal is going on. As public interest grew, the sheriff's office made an unusual but very pointed request on October 20th. They asked the public not to conduct their own searches or investigations. Not because they didn't appreciate the concern, but because amateur sleuths, they could interfere with what was quickly becoming a fragile, complicated case. Then came the information dumps. On October 22nd, investigators released a public timeline of Melodee's movements, which I talked about at the top of the episode. On October 24th, they released surveillance images from the rental car agency, images that sent the whole case spiraling in a new direction. Because in those photos, Melodee isn't just standing beside her mom, she's wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt with the hood up, patterned black leggings, and what appears to be a wig, darker and straighter than her natural brown curls. It really doesn't look anything like her in the photos. If you want to see the photos, they are readily available online, and I'll also have them posted over on my social media pages. Detectives noted that the wig may have been used to alter her appearance and pointed out that Ashlee is also known to wear wigs. The implication was subtle but unmistakable. Someone was trying not to be recognized. The very same reason that the Malibu's license plates had to have been switched. But the question was, why? That same day, Melodee's father's side of the family, the side that she had not been allowed to see, they held a candlelight vigil for her. They gathered on October 24th, praying for a child they hadn't been with in years, hoping that she was still alive. 6 days later, on October 30th, investigators served follow-up search warrants at the Buzzard home, at a storage locker, and on the rental car itself. They were looking for anything that could anchor this story to reality. Detectives began backtracking the entire route from Arkansas to California, trying desperately to confirm sightings of Melodee before the return drive home to Lompoc. And the further back they looked, the thinner the proof got. As investigators kept pushing, Ashlee kept pushing away. You'd think that she would want to find her daughter, but it certainly didn't look that way. By October 20th, the sheriff's office formally announced, quote, "At this stage, Ashlee remains uncooperative and has not provided any information about Melodee's current location or welfare." Yeah, she was not talking at all. Family members started coming forward too, painting a distressing picture of what life looked like behind closed doors. Melodee's aunt, Vicky Shade, told the Los Angeles Times that Ashlee had been mentally unstable, refusing to let their side of the family even see Melodee. She said her own mother tried to get custody or at least visitation rights because they were worried, deeply worried, about Melodee's safety. There were also questions about Melodee's schooling. ABC News reported she had been homeschooled and had not checked in since October of 2024. But the California Department of Education had no record of Ashlee ever filing the legally required paperwork to homeschool a child. And here's the frustrating truth. Investigators kept circling back to Ashlee, but she has a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Even if the silence is damning, even if the silence hurts the case, even if public opinion is screaming at her to talk. As one legal analyst put it, quote, "There is no legal imperative at all under any circumstance, no matter how bad things might look for you in public opinion, for you to say anything." And Ashlee, she has taken full advantage of that ability to be silent, which leaves investigators and the rest of Melodee's family trying to solve a disappearance without the one person who claims that she was there, and who refuses to give them anything they need. If the timeline was already hanging together by dental floss and wishful thinking, what happened next just tore the whole thing wide open. On November 7th, investigators announced that Melodee's mother, Ashlee Buzzard, had been arrested and charged with false imprisonment, not in connection with Melodee's disappearance, but after allegedly holding a man captive inside her home. The charge alone was enough to raise eyebrows, but the details were unhinged. The man's name is Tyler Brewer. He is a self-described court officer who had been visiting Ashlee multiple times in the weeks after Melodee vanished. And according to Brewer, things escalated fast. He told investigators that while he was visiting Ashlee, she, quote, became visibly distressed after sharing information she appeared to regret disclosing. Then out of nowhere, according to Tyler Brewer, she allegedly grabbed a box cutter, locked the doors of her home, and wouldn't let him leave. That's when Brewer realized he might be in way over his head. He later told News Nation that before things took a sharp left turn, Ashlee had told him where Melodee was and who she was with. Not only that, she claimed she left her daughter with a couple in Utah, a couple she had allegedly met at a zoo. Yeah, a zoo couple in Utah. Did she really know this couple? Not really, according to her. She didn't know their full names, their phone numbers, or address. Whatever phone number she had originally used to communicate with this couple for the exchange, apparently it was no longer working, so she couldn't get a hold of them now. However, according to Ashlee, this couple did have a young daughter around the same age as Melodee, so she was in good hands, it was fine, and she would have someone to play with until Ashlee returned to get her. This is the level of reality that we're working with. Now, the problem, even Brewer wasn't sure if she was telling the truth with this story, and honestly, can you blame him? According to Brewer, every time he pressed her on more details, whether Melodee was alive, whether she had been trafficked, whether she had been harmed, Ashlee would allegedly start fake crying, dodging direct answers, and refusing to give a clear yes or no answer. Brewer said her behavior made him, quote, extremely uncomfortable because even though he didn't want to believe Ashlee could hurt Melodee, she wasn't willing to give him the reassurance anyone would want to hear. But he also said that he has known Ashlee since 2014, and since the recent news of Melodee's disappearance, she had been acting extremely different, completely different. He described her as being very paranoid. She kept talking about how she thought that people were listening to her conversations, that the whole place was bugged and people were watching her. Brewer said Ashlee told him that she had taken that messy cross-country trip with Melodee at the instructions of these people who she barely knew, the Utah zoo couple. But why? What was her reasoning for leaving her daughter with this couple? Well, in Ashlee's version of events, Melodee, quote, needed to be temporarily relocated because she was supposedly scheduled for outpatient surgery, Ashlee was. A surgery that Ashlee claimed she couldn't properly manage while also caring for her daughter. We don't know the specifics around this details. The medical information has not been shared. We don't know what kind of surgery she was expecting to get. But according to Tyler, who does know the details, it wasn't something that would have taken longer than really a day to recover from. Brewer described it like this, quote, in her mind, it's something that Melodee needs to be away for at least a month or two, an effort for Ashlee to get back on her feet after this alleged surgery. It's a bizarre justification that raises far more questions than it does answers. A 9-year-old being left with strangers so that her mother could get surgery? A road trip taken on the advice of near strangers? A mother who refuses to clarify anything while her daughter is missing? Ashlee let another detail slip. The reason for the complicated road trip was because this couple kept changing the drop-off location. Apparently, Ashlee wasn't the only one who was paranoid. This supposed couple kept changing the plan because they too were worried that people were watching and listening, especially the government. Doesn't this story sound vaguely familiar to the one given by Casey Anthony? Do you guys all remember Zanny the nanny? Casey said she dropped little Kaylee off with the nanny, Zanny, and she hadn't been seen since. But there was no Zanny the nanny. This woman never existed, and Kaylee certainly was not dropped off with her. Kaylee's little body was later found in a heavily wooded area close to the family home, and she had been murdered. So in Melodee's case, the hope is that this little story, it's the only thing similar to Casey Anthony's alibi. Now, this false imprisonment charge that Ashlee was facing, stemming from her alleged incident with Tyler Brewer on November 6th, it didn't stick. A judge dismissed the charge on November 20th. There just wasn't enough evidence for a conviction. And Ashlee came prepared. She was armed with recorded audio from the event. Of course, Ashlee didn't record the entire interaction with Tyler, which would have really been helpful, where she gave this story about the couple. But she did conveniently record the parts where it sounds like she's telling Tyler that he can go, he's free to go. But even with the legal charge gone and taken care of, the damage to the timeline and to Ashlee's credibility, it was already done. Because Brewer's account didn't just paint Ashlee as evasive or overwhelmed, it painted her as someone who was withholding information, someone who contradicted herself, someone who seemed terrified of what she'd already said out loud. Meanwhile, detectives were scrambling to backtrack the entire route from California to Arkansas, trying to figure out where along those hundreds of miles Melodee disappeared, and whether the last person seen with her was telling the truth, lying, or living in a completely different reality than everyone else. And for investigators, the more they pressed into these conversations, the more the timeline cracked. Every answer created 3 new questions. Every clue pointed to another contradiction. Every direction they turned, the story shifted again. And the one person who could straighten it out, the one person who was there, had stopped cooperating long before this conversation ever happened. As the investigation grinds on, the public has gotten louder, way louder. This is the part where Facebook groups become FBI headquarters. Reddit believes it's cracking the case in real time, and every armchair detective with Wi-Fi, me, is suddenly an expert on interstate timelines. People start pulling apart every detail, every inconsistency, every grainy screenshot. Some people are convinced that Melodee is safe and sound with someone that Ashlee left her with. And truly, this is the best case scenario that we can hope for at this point. That for whatever reason, Ashlee believed that her 9-year-old daughter would be better off in the care of someone else for the moment. So she dropped her off with them. And for some reason, she just doesn't want us to know where or who these strangers are. Others argue that Ashlee did something nefarious with her daughter. No matter which camp you fall under, people are side-eyeing Ashlee like she's rewriting her story every time she opens her mouth. Police, for their part, remain cautious, but definitely not passive. They continue to release alerts, they pull surveillance from everywhere they can, they bring in specialized teams and additional agencies. And they continue to retrace every mile of that road trip, trying to figure out where things went from confusing to catastrophic. But behind the scenes, investigators are circling one major issue. The timeline doesn't add up. The sightings don't add up. And Ashlee, the mother's statements, they really don't add up. It's a triangle of contradictions, and Melodee is trapped in the middle. No matter how many searches they run, they can't produce a trace of her. Not a shoe, not a footprint, not a scrap of clothing that she was wearing, nothing. And here's the brutal truth that investigators are dealing with. Parents fall apart when their child goes missing. They collapse, they sob, they claw at the air looking for answers. They don't fall apart when the story is questioned, unless there's something to hide. But law enforcement can't and won't charge someone just because the public is screaming at them. They need evidence, they need facts, and this case seems determined to leave as little evidence behind as humanly possible. The sheriff's office knows that people are getting anxious and impatient, but They've been through this kind of nightmare before, and they know how these cases can evolve. In fact, there are high-profile cases involving missing children that have followed a chillingly similar early pattern, and I'm sure that you are familiar with them. Take, again, Casey Anthony. Her daughter, Kaylee, disappeared in 2008. At first, Casey was only charged with neglect, providing false statements, and obstruction. Months later, she was indicted for murder after Kaylee's remains were found. The jury ultimately acquitted her of murder, but they did convict her of lying to police. This was the only charge that they were able to make stick, so they took it. They took it as a small win of whatever they could get. Then there's Lori Vallow, the Idaho mother whose children, JJ and Tylee, vanished in 2019. Now, when she was first arrested, in Hawaii no less, she wasn't charged with killing them. She was charged with desertion and non-support. Later, after the children's bodies were discovered, she and her husband, Chad Daybell, were indicted for murder. Both were eventually convicted. Early charges don't always reflect the full picture of what investigators know or suspect. Sometimes they're just placeholders while detectives keep building the case behind closed doors. So, how will Melodee's case play out? Nobody knows yet. Not law enforcement, not the public, not even the people trying to read between the lines of every update. Right now, the only thing everyone agrees on is this. A 9-year-old girl is missing. The timeline is broken. The truth feels buried, and the person who should be able to untangle it won't say a word. As investigators work around the clock and the public has begged for answers, more troubling behavior from Ashlee started to come to light. Not just inconsistent timelines, not just evasive answers, not just a story about a couple at a zoo, but something that felt symbolic and deeply unsettling. According to private investigator Bill Garcia, who was hired by Melodee's aunt, a witness inside Ashlee's home saw her cut Melodee's face out of her own missing child posters to keep. Garcia told News Nation that the pieces were placed on a table inside the home. In his words, quote, "To me, it represents an altar, not saying that she's deceased, but it's something that she can have some memory of." Now again, of course, this doesn't prove anything, but it does hint at a mother living in a reality that no one else understands, where memory, guilt, fear, and secrecy all kind of blur into one. Now, according to Tyler Brewer, who has been in her home, allegedly she has these cutout photos of her daughter all lined up on her couch next to a body pillow, which she has dressed up in Melodee's clothing. Not exactly typical behavior, but we don't know what's going on there. Ashlee does have a history with mental illness. So is this some kind of psychotic break, or is this a mother grieving? Again, we don't know. But here's the twist. The private investigator, Garcia, he doesn't believe that Melodee is gone, not at all. In fact, after more than 30 years working missing persons cases, Garcia says the one thing he is certain of is this, quote, "I don't believe she left Melodee." He believes that the story about Utah, the zoo couple, the relocation, the medical procedure, it's all a smokescreen, not a clue, not a breadcrumb, but a complete distraction. Something designed to send people in the wrong direction, while the truth stays much closer to home. He said, quote, "I don't see her leaving her out anywhere with anyone. I don't see her leaving her out in the brush or in the woods. I see her bringing her all the way home if something happened to her." Home. That word lands heavy in this case. According to Garcia, Ashlee has taken this cross-country route before. She knows it well. And he believes that Melodee is not in Utah. She's not across state lines. She's not with a mystery couple or hiding in a remote cabin. He believes that she's in Lompoc, where they live, somewhere close, somewhere familiar, somewhere only one person knows about. How this case will end, nobody knows yet. Not the investigators, not the family, not the public trying to read between the lines of every press release. What we do know is that a 9-year-old little girl is missing. A little girl who has been described as between 4 feet and 4'6", 60 to 100 pounds, with brown curly hair and brown eyes. a child who deserves to come home no matter the truth behind the story. And right now, that truth feels buried under layers of lies, desperation, mental instability, and secrets no one has managed to pry open yet. If you know anything at all, that could help bring Melodee home, please contact investigators at 805-681-4150. Because a child doesn't just disappear, not without someone knowing why. And wherever Melodee is, she deserves to be found. That's it for me tonight. If you want to reach out, you can find me on Facebook at Serial Napper. You can find my audio on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. I post all of my episodes in video format over on YouTube, so go check it out. I'm also on Patreon if you'd like to get your Serial Napper episodes early and ad-free. Hop on over and check out all the details at patreon.com/serialnapper. Until next time, stay safe, stay kind, and keep your eyes open for the people who can't speak for themselves. Bye.